I need to read the skill file before writing, but since this is a pure writing task, no file creation needed, let me check the names to avoid and write directly. The band names are Claire, Marcus, Priya, Danielle. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a second. Just stood there. The refrigerator was humming. The neighbor's dog was barking at something outside. Everything was so ordinary and loud and I couldn't move. Then I picked the phone back up and called my grandmother. I didn't cry. I didn't scream at my mom or throw anything or say the things that were climbing up my throat. I just walked to my room, sat down on the edge of my bed, and called my grandmother. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does, like she was already waiting. I said, "Grandma, I need to tell you something." And then I told her everything. My grandmother's name is Ruth. No, wait, I need to tell this right. Let me back up. My grandmother, I call her Nana, saved money for me for 18 years. She started when I was born. She worked as a seamstress out of her house in Cartersville, Georgia, taking in alterations and prom dresses and wedding gowns, and every month she put a little aside. She called it my Bright Fund. Not a college fund. A bright fund. Because she said she didn't care what I did with it. College, trade school, starting a business, traveling. She just wanted my future to be bright. By the time I turned 20, that fund had $143,000 in it. My name is Serena. I'm 28 now. I'm telling this story because I think I'm finally far enough away from it that I can say it out loud without my hands shaking. My parents were my parents. My mom ran the household and managed my dad's schedule and considered herself the family's chief executive officer. My dad sold insurance and did whatever my mom said and genuinely believed, that this made him a good husband. My brother is 4 years older than me. His name is Kyle. Kyle has my mom's chin and my dad's instinct for following the path of least resistance, and from the time he was about 15, he was the axis around which our family rotated. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it like a fact. The way you'd say the sky is blue or the stove is hot. Kyle was the one who mattered. I was the other one. I figured this out early. Not in a dramatic revelation kind of way. More like you figure out that the chair in the corner of your room is always going to wobble. You just learn not to put your full weight on it. I stopped expecting equal attention around the time I was 12. I stopped expecting equal anything by the time I was 16. What I did not stop expecting, what I held on to like something precious, was that fund. Because Nana made it for me. It had my name on it. It was the one thing in my life that was unambiguously, legally, entirely mine. I should explain how the account worked. Nana had set it up through her bank as a custodial account when I was an infant. When I turned 18, it was supposed to transfer fully into my name. What happened instead was that my mom convinced Nana, in one of those long phone calls I wasn't invited to, that it would be more practical to keep my parents as co-signatories for another 2 years, just until I got settled. Nana agreed. She trusted her daughter. That was the mistake neither of us knew we were making. I was 20 when I came home for Thanksgiving, and my mom sat me down at the kitchen table and said there was something she needed to tell me. I thought someone had died. The way she folded her hands, the way my dad looked at the window instead of at me. "We used your fund," she said, "for Kyle." I didn't say anything. "He needed it, Serena. He's been struggling. The business isn't doing well and he's about to lose the apartment. And you're young, you have time, you can rebuild." "How much?" I said. She paused. "How much?" I said again. "Most of it," my dad said, still looking at the window. I asked them to be specific. My mom shifted in her chair. My dad rubbed the back of his neck. Finally, she said, 119,000. The room didn't tilt. Nothing dramatic happened. I just felt something go very quiet inside me, like a room you've walked into where all the sound has been absorbed by the walls. "Why?" I said. And my mom looked at me, not unkindly, which was almost worse, and she said, "Because he needs it more." Kyle is trying to build something real. You're still figuring yourself out. He needed a foundation, and you'll find your way. I said, that money wasn't yours to give. She said, we made a family decision. I said, I wasn't in the family meeting. She said, Serena. Just my name, in that tone. The tone that meant, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The tone that meant, be the easy one, like you always are. The tone that meant, you are not the one who matters here. I stood up. I walked to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed. I picked up my phone. I called my grandmother. Nana was 71 at the time. She lived alone in the house in Cartersville with her sewing room and her vegetable garden and a cat named Biscuit, who had strong opinions about everything. She had survived my grandfather's death, a hip replacement, and 30 years of dealing with my mother, and she was, without question, the sharpest person in our family. I told her everything. The table. My mom's folded hands, the $119,000, the phrase, he needed it more. Nana was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said in the very calm voice, Baby, I'm going to need you to go online and pull up the account statements for the last 2 years. Every transaction. Can you do that? I said yes. She said, Good. Do it tonight. Save everything. Don't tell your parents. I said, Nana, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to handle it. That was all. She said good night and she hung up, and I sat in my childhood bedroom surrounded by the stuff I'd outgrown. A spelling bee trophy, a poster from a movie I barely remembered, a bookshelf full of paperbacks, and I pulled up the account online and I started reading. The withdrawal started 22 months earlier. Small ones at first. 2,000 here, 1,500 there, then bigger. Then a single transfer of 40,000 in March, then 30 in July, then the rest in pieces over 6 weeks, like they were trying not to make it look like what it was. My dad's name was on every single transaction, not my mom's. His. I printed everything. I saved every PDF. I sent it all to an email address I created just for this. Then I went to sleep, because what else do you do? My grandmother did not call my mother that night. She did not call her the next day or the day after. What Nana did, and I only found out about this in pieces later, was call her attorney. She had a family attorney, a woman named Patricia who had handled Nana's estate planning and was, apparently, also very interested in the details of what had happened. Patricia told Nana she had options. The account was custodial. The funds were designated for me, the withdrawals, made by co-signatories for a purpose that had nothing to do with my welfare, were potentially actionable. There were words like breach of fiduciary duty and constructive fraud. I didn't understand all of it at first. I understand it now. Nana also, and this is the part that still makes me press my hand to my mouth when I think about it, went to her bank, the same bank where the account had been held for 20 years. She sat down with the branch manager, a man she had known since he was a junior teller, and she showed him everything. She told him what her daughter and son-in-law had done with money that was meant for her granddaughter. He personally flagged the account for review and contacted the bank's compliance team. Then Nana did one more thing. She called my aunt, my mom's sister, who lived 3 streets over from my parents, and she told my parents' neighbors, the Hendersons, who had known our family for 15 years. And she called the woman who ran the church committee my mom chaired, and she told the ladies in her quilting group, who were spread across 2 counties and had the communication infrastructure of a very dedicated intelligence network. My grandmother did not raise her voice once. She just made sure everyone knew. I found out what was happening about a week after Thanksgiving, when my aunt called me. Your grandmother told me, she said, Serena. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. My phone kept lighting up after that. A cousin, a family friend, someone who knew Kyle from church, reached out to say they'd heard something and were thinking of me. I don't know exactly what Nana said in each conversation. I know she told the truth. I know she was specific about the amount. I know she let people draw their own conclusions. My mom called me 3 days later. Her voice was different, tight, controlled, like she was holding something in. People are talking, she said. I said, I know. Your grandmother is. She's making things very difficult. I said, she's telling the truth. Serena, this is a family matter. It stopped being a family matter, I said, when you took $119,000 that belonged to me. She said, after everything we've done for you, I said. I didn't ask to be born. You chose to have me. That's not a debt I owe you. And then I hung up, which was the first time in my life I had ever done that, and I sat with the feeling for a while. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like setting something heavy down. By January we had filed. Patricia, Nana's attorney, connected me with a civil litigation attorney named James who handled cases like mine, with the kind of quiet focus that makes you trust someone immediately. He reviewed the account statements, the transfer records, the original custodial agreement. He said what Nana's attorney had said. We had a case. My dad's attorney called James in February and asked about settlement options. Kyle called me in March. First time he'd reached out since Thanksgiving. He sounded terrible, voice rough, sentences trailing off. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known where the money came from, not exactly, that Mom had told him it was family savings they'd set aside for him. I said, Kyle, the account had my name on it. How did you not ask? He was quiet. I said, you didn't want to know. He didn't argue. I said, I don't hate you, but I need you to stay out of this. He said okay. He sounded relieved, which told me something. My parents settled in April. The terms included full repayment of the $119,000, plus interest calculated from the date of the first unauthorized withdrawal. My dad liquidated a portion of his retirement account. My mom sold a piece of jewelry she'd inherited. Kyle, on his own, without being asked, wrote a check for $12,000 toward the total. He said it was what he could do right now, and he was sorry it wasn't more. The total came back to me was $131,400. I cried exactly once during this whole process, and it was the afternoon that money landed in my account. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment in Nashville. I'd moved there 2 years earlier for work, and I opened the banking app and saw the number, and I put my head down on my arms and cried for about 10 minutes. Not for the money. For the 18 years my grandmother spent stitching it together, stitch by stitch, alteration by alteration, because she wanted my future to be bright. Then I dried my face and called her. She said, "Is it done?" I said, "It's done." She said, "Good. Now what are you going to do with it?" And I started laughing, because of course that was her question, of course. I want to say something about forgiveness, because it's the thing people always ask about. I've thought about it a lot. I've talked about it with my therapist, who I started seeing this spring after all of this. I've turned it over in my mind at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep. Here's where I've landed. Forgiving someone and trusting someone are not the same thing. Forgiving someone and welcoming them back into your life are not the same thing. Forgiveness, if I ever fully get there, is something I do for myself, to put down the weight of it. It is not a pass. It is not a reset. It does not mean what they did was okay, or that the relationship goes back to what it was before. I don't speak to my parents much. We're not no contact, but we're something close to it. I send cards at Christmas. I answer calls on birthdays. That's the shape of it right now. Kyle and I have talked a few times. It's slow. It's careful. I don't know where it ends up. My grandmother and I talk on the phone every Sunday. She's 74 now. Biscuit the cat passed away last year, and she got a new kitten she named Pepper, who apparently has even stronger opinions. She's still sewing. She told me last month she was doing alterations for a wedding in June, and the mother of the bride kept changing her mind, and Nana was handling it with grace and a letter opener nearby. I'm doing fine. I work in marketing. I have an apartment and a savings account and a therapist I like and friends I trust. I used part of the money to pay off my student loans. Part of it is invested. Part of it is sitting there, not earmarked for anything yet, which feels like its own kind of freedom. The thing I hold on to, the thing I keep coming back to, is that my grandmother could have handled this quietly. She could have pushed for the money back without telling a single soul outside this family. She could have kept it contained. She chose not to, and people ask me, was that right? Was it fair to my parents? To Kyle? I think about this. I really do. And the answer I keep arriving at is, my grandmother spent 18 years building something for me in silence. Stitch by stitch. Dollar by dollar. Nobody threw her a party for that. Nobody called it news. It was just a woman who loved her granddaughter and showed up for that love, quietly, for almost 2 decades. She decided that what was done to that kind of love, deserved to be spoken out loud. I think she was right. There's a detail I didn't include earlier that I want to include now because it matters. The week after I found out, before any of the legal process started, before Nana had told anyone, I drove to Cartersville. I showed up at her door on a Wednesday afternoon without calling first. She opened the door and looked at me for a second, and then just stepped back to let me in. We sat in her sewing room. Bolts of fabric leaning against the walls, a half-finished bridesmaid dress on the mannequin. Biscuit asleep on top of a folded tablecloth. She made coffee and put a plate of the butter cookies she always made in front of me, and she sat across the small table and said, "Tell me how you're doing. Not the legal part, you." I said I didn't know. I said I felt stupid mostly, that I had believed, for 20 years, that I was loved by my parents, and now I couldn't figure out if that was true, or if I had just been a convenient piece of the picture they wanted to present. I said I felt like someone had pulled a thread and the whole sweater had come undone, and I was standing there holding a pile of yarn, wondering what I'd actually been wearing this whole time. Nana listened to all of it. She didn't rush me, or reassure me prematurely. When I was done, she said, "You weren't stupid. You loved your family, and you trusted them and they broke that. That's not your failure, that's theirs," she said. "What they took wasn't just money. I want you to know I understand that. It was 18 years of someone choosing you. And they decided that didn't matter. And I need you to know it does matter. It always did. It always will." I didn't cry then either. I just nodded and ate a butter cookie and listened to the sewing machine hum, but I think about that moment a lot. On bad days, on days when I catch myself shrinking, or apologizing for things that aren't my fault, or automatically making myself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. I think about my grandmother in that sewing room, telling me it mattered. And then I straighten up. If you've ever been the background child, the one who learned early that the space you occupied was conditional, that love in your house came with an asterisk, I want you to hear something. You figured out how to need less, how to go quiet, how to make peace with the wobbling chair. And you probably got very good at it, good enough that most people couldn't even see you doing it. That's not weakness. That's what you did to survive. But surviving isn't the ceiling. I'm still learning that, still practicing it. But I know it now in a way I didn't know it at 20, standing in my parents' kitchen watching my dad look at the window. You were allowed to take up space. You were allowed to call your grandmother. You were allowed to say, "This was mine, and I'm not letting it go." I'll end here because this is where it ends for me, for now. Last month I drove back through Cartersville on my way to visit a friend in Atlanta. I took the long way through town on purpose, past the house I grew up in. I didn't stop. And then past Nana's street, past the blue shutters and the vegetable garden starting to come back in the spring. And I slowed down just enough to see the light on in the sewing room. She was in there. Working. I kept driving, but I rolled the window down. The air smelled like Georgia in April, which is a specific and unrepeatable thing. Red clay and cut grass, and something blooming that you can't quite name. I drove the rest of the way to Atlanta with the window down. That's all. That's the whole story. I've thought a lot about what actually caused all of this. Not just the legal part, not just the money. The whole thing. And the more I sit with it, the more I think it started long before my parents made that first withdrawal. It started with a pattern. A quiet, consistent pattern of teaching me that my needs were negotiable. and Kyle's were not. That I was the flexible one. The one who could wait. The one who would find her way. And because I had accepted that for so long, because I had gotten so good at making myself small, they believed it too. They believed it so completely that they looked at 18 years of my grandmother's work and decided it was available for redistribution. That's the thing about being the background child. People stop seeing you as someone with a future that belongs to you. They see you as a resource. Patient. Adaptable. Uncomplaining. And every time you don't complain, it confirms something in their minds. She doesn't really need it. She'll be fine. I was fine. But not because of them. In spite of them. My grandmother understood something my parents never did. She understood that showing up for someone, consistently and quietly over years, that is not a small thing. That is one of the largest things a person can do. Nana didn't make speeches. She didn't sit me down and tell me I was loved. She just sewed. Month after month, year after year. And in doing that, she was saying something that no one else in my family was saying. Your future matters. You matter. When my parents took that, when they decided that Kyle's present need outweighed 18 years of deliberate, patient love, they weren't just stealing money. They were trying to erase the only unambiguous message I had ever received that I was worth investing in. Nana understood that too. I think that's why she didn't stay quiet. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more like, no, not this. This one I will not let go of in silence. What I carry from all of it is this. The choices we make about who we show up for, and how consistently, those choices compound over time. My parents made a series of small choices, over years, that said Kyle first, Serena later. My grandmother made a series of small choices, over years, that said Serena, always. Both sets of choices had consequences. One set built something, the other set destroyed something. And when it all came to a head in that kitchen in November, the results of both sets of choices landed in the same room at the same time. That's not fate. That's just math. I think about the person I was at 20, sitting in that childhood bedroom, printing bank statements at midnight. I was scared and I was hurt, and I felt profoundly stupid for having trusted the people who were supposed to love me most. What I know now that I didn't know then is that trusting people who should be trustworthy is not stupidity. It is the correct default. The failure was theirs, not mine. Strength isn't the absence of being hurt. It's what you do after. It's printing the statements. It's calling your grandmother. It's sitting across from an attorney and saying, clearly and without apology, this was mine, and I want it back. Intelligence isn't knowing everything in advance. It's being willing to learn what you didn't know, update what you believed, and act on the truth even when the truth is painful. And integrity, the kind that actually holds up, looks like my grandmother sitting with a branch manager she'd known for 20 years, showing him the statements and telling him what her daughter had done. Not out of cruelty. Out of an unwillingness to let a wrong thing be treated like a quiet thing. I'm still learning how to take up space without apologizing for it. Still catching myself shrinking sometimes, out of habit. But I know now that the space is mine. It always was. Nana knew that before I did. She spent 18 years proving it.